Hi, everyone. Welcome to our channel. Well, Douglas Macgregor suggests that the recent incident appears to have occurred within the structure, possibly related to electrical issues in the turbine. Whether it was deliberate explosives or damage from last year remains unclear. Many speculate that neither the Ukrainians nor the Russians intentionally caused the damage. From a military perspective, the flooded area on the eastern side poses challenges for Ukrainian operations, making movement difficult. World. Just before he came on, his friend Chuck Spinney pointed out concerns regarding the operational status of all the reactors. Both the Russians and Ukrainians attempted to deactivate most of the reactors, but uncertainty remains about one possibly still running. Water is crucial for cooling these reactors, and the drop in the river's water level near Severodvinsk raises valid concerns about water availability. A nuclear accident would be catastrophic. The upper river was transformed into a reservoir by the Soviets, who flooded out the area previously known as the Cossacks' Fish, a Cossack Ukrainian state in the 1500s and 1600s. This area now hosts the reservoir, which was once the site of an island in the upper river. The Soviets aimed to harness power, resulting in the construction of a nuclear power plant that has been a significant energy source for Ukraine. The concern now lies in ensuring an adequate water supply for cooling the reactors, assuming any are still operational. Regarding accusations, the Ukrainians tend to blame the Russians for everything while the Russians deny involvement. There seems to be no incentive for the Russians to cause such damage, especially considering the logistical challenges it would create for Ukrainian operations. If anyone benefited inadvertently, one could argue that the Russians did, as the reduced defensive line presents fewer challenges for them. Reflecting on recent military engagement, significant losses incurred by the Ukrainians indicate the challenges they face against the tightly integrated Russian defense. Probing attacks over the weekend resulted in substantial Ukrainian losses compared to minimal Russian casualties. The effectiveness of the Russian defense raises questions about potential future offensives and their impact. Absolutely. Morale is at its lowest, akin to being in the basement. It's a tragic situation, and the military leadership is acutely aware of it, appearing frantic. Strategic. It's whether Ukraine has any resources left at that point. If the Russians advance as anticipated, they're poised to overrun much of the territory east of the upper region and likely cross the bridge at Zaporizhzhia or other strategic points, advancing south toward Odessa. Adding our aircraft to their arsenal is an option, but it risks escalating into a direct conflict with Russia, which even this administration seems wary of at this juncture. There are undoubtedly Ukrainian commanders in the field questioning the whereabouts of additional troops and the reasons for their absence. It's perplexing to consider what they hope to achieve with the recent offensive, aside from projecting readiness and capability. The troops appeared immaculate in their uniforms, indicating little combat experience. Normally, soldiers in prolonged combat situations lose weight and wear worn-out uniforms, unlike what was depicted. Despite the clean appearance since the equipment, including 54 destroyed tanks, possibly including some Leopard tanks, suggests a significant loss. There's no evidence to suggest the presence of infiltrators causing disruptions in the areas claimed by Ukraine. While there have been incidents, such as the attack on the Crimea Bridge attributed to the SS Special Air Service, it's risky to deploy such units behind enemy lines, although they seem to have done so successfully. Recent drone attacks on Moscow could also be linked to their actions. Such actions, however, are minimal and do not significantly alter the broader outcome, akin to pinpricks in the larger context of conflict. They may even strengthen the resolve of the Russian people to support crushing Ukraine. Despite provocations, President Putin has shown restraint, refraining from invoking such incidents to justify massive attacks on Ukraine, opting instead to acknowledge them and signal continued future strikes. He was describing individuals attempting to predict market movements in stocks and bonds, dismissing their efforts as futile. The focus, he contends, is on transferring clients' funds from their pockets to yours, akin to a scam. He draws parallels between this approach and Zelensky's tactics, emphasizing the reliance on false promises for more money, which he finds ridiculous. Regarding Putin's invasion of Ukraine, he asserts it as a strategic failure by almost every measure. Despite this, Putin persists, believing he can outlast Ukraine and its supporters by prolonging the conflict, even at the cost of Russian lives and Ukrainian suffering. However, he believes Putin's strategy is flawed, as the United States and its allies remain steadfast in supporting Ukraine's defense for as long as necessary. Reflecting on Germany's economic situation, he expresses concern over its descent into recession, attributing it to energy policies that undermine its industrial power. He criticizes German leadership and notes public dissatisfaction, suggesting it could be indicative of broader discontent within Western Europe. He questions the feasibility of Russia simultaneously being incompetent and bent on conquering Eastern and Central Europe, dismissing it as nonsensical. He observes a lack of concern among U.S. senators regarding Ukrainian casualties and financial costs, highlighting their recent approval of a substantial debt ceiling increase despite impending consequences. He warns of the impending fallout for the United States and the West, questioning the actions Americans will take when faced with the inevitable crisis. He recounts staggering Soviet losses during World War II, emphasizing the immense human toll. He challenges the notion that Western aid, particularly through the Lend-Lease program, was the primary factor in Germany's defeat, suggesting it played a significant role despite being overshadowed in Soviet narratives. No, FDR acted unilaterally. There was no bill authorizing him to freely ship goods to the Soviet Union at the time. In July 1941, during the first Moscow meeting with Stalin, Harry Hopkins orchestrated the discussions, excluding only the U.S. ambassador in defense attacks. At this meeting, the entire Lend-Lease program was established with Stalin outlining his requirements, including petroleum, which the U.S. provided in such abundance that the Russians resold large quantities to the Japanese despite being at war with them. The delivery route for petroleum from the North Atlantic to Russia during World War I involved crossing the Pacific under the Russian flag, ensuring safe passage past Japanese forces, delivering to Vladivostok. This narrative challenges the conventional understanding of World War II, highlighting the complex interactions among nations. He questions the portrayal of FDR's intentions, suggesting he sought to weaken the British Empire rather than support it, viewing it as evil while exempting Stalin's regime. Stalin repeatedly urged Western action in the West to draw German forces away from the Eastern Front. The Normandy invasion diverted German resources, enabling the Soviets to launch Operation Bagration, liberating vast territories up to the Carpathian Mountains. The strategic bombing campaign significantly weakened Germany's petroleum industry, crucial for its military operations. The recent drone attack launched from within Russia underscores the challenges of border security along its vast impenetrable borders. Although most drones were intercepted, a few managed to evade detection, potentially due to technical issues or Russian jamming systems. There are suggestions of SAS involvement, highlighting covert operations in the region. Well, I'm certain President Biden would emphasize plausible deniability, claiming he wasn't informed or that they weren't urged to take certain actions. Realistically, every decision is based on data provided to them, including overhead surveillance and detailed intelligence. While the intelligence support is undoubtedly present, there's a strategic emphasis on maintaining plausible deniability, even if they were aware of impending actions for weeks beforehand. The combination of arrogance and self-delusion prevalent in Washington shapes perceptions of Russia, often rooted in outdated views from the 1990s. Many still perceive Russia as a weak state with a struggling economy, despite evidence to the contrary. These delusions, coupled with arrogance about military power, contribute to misunderstandings about Russia's capabilities and intentions. While acknowledging the accuracy of her statements, it's clear she represents a partisan perspective intent on perpetuating conflict. Such individuals are willing to manipulate truths to support their agenda, even if it means sustaining perpetual war. There are different types of fools, and unfortunately, this individual falls into the category of dangerous, foolish. He lacks understanding of the consequences of his actions and underestimates Russia's status as a global power, opting instead for delusions and arrogance.